Compared to this, my father seems briefly to be a fire escape, feasting on bodega sandwiches and oranges, walking miles of New Jersey concrete, making street photos. Yeah, I don't know where I'd be without Cave Canem.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Cave Canem Fellows reading here at the Stanza hosted by Diverses. Give yourselves a round of applause coming out for poetry. That's what's up. I will be your host and also final reader of the evening. We got 3 Cave Canem Fellows, which is super, super exciting. I think we're all graduates, so none of us can go back unless they call Marcus to say, hey, could you take some pictures? Which you still haven't sent me. I don't think. Oh, snap. I can take my own. It's not a big deal. I can take my own pictures. But yeah. But he's got the film. He does the film stuff, which is cool. Anyways, we're going to dive right in. You good, sir? Yeah. Give you a quick intro. So our first poet of the evening is Marcus Jackson. Marcus is faculty over at OSU. He is a photographer. He is a poet. He's got books. And he's a dad. And he and I have the same hair, which is really cool, because not a lot of people have our hair. Please give a nice warm welcome to Marcus Jackson. Marcus.
Thanks so much, Jeff. And Rose, and everyone who's here. And to Cave Canem eternally.
Yes.
I have a 70-minute set prepared. No, I'm kidding. I want to start, I'll do a couple poems by the co-founders of Cave Canem,
Yes.
Toy and Cornelius, and then I'll do, I think, one poem from a book, and then I'll do a long poem that is just getting finished. Yeah, I don't know where I'd be without Cave Canem. I started right after my MFA finished, and it felt like being born, and it still feels that way in terms of finding community and finding my real voice. I wouldn't know myself without Cave Canem. So I'll read a poem by Toy Derricott, and I'll apologize ahead of time. It's not really a joyful time for me in terms of like large scale national level living. So some of the content here is pretty difficult or dark, but I do think there's a lot of beauty in especially these first 2 poems. And I picked them because they're really wonderful symbols of how life in America as someone marginalized becomes a fight with your own community, with your own self, because there's so much crazy political doublespeak and treachery happening. And that's why I picked these 2 poems among just mind-blowing catalogs by Toy Derricott and Cornelius Eady. This Toy poem is called The Minx. In the backyard of our house on Norwood, there were 500 steel cages lined up, each with a wooden box roofed with tar paper. Inside, 2 stories with straw for a bed. Sometimes the minx would pace back and forth wildly, looking for a way out, or else they'd hide in their wooden houses, even when we'd put the offering of raw horse meat on their trays, as if they knew they were beautiful and wanted to deprive us. In spring, the placid kits drank with glazed eyes. Sometimes the mothers would go mad and snap their necks. My uncle would lift the roof like a god who might lift our roof, look down on us and take us out to safety. Sometimes one would escape. He would go down on his hands and knees, aiming a flashlight like a bullet of light, hoping to catch the orange gold of its eyes. He wore huge boots, gloves so thick their teeth couldn't bite through. They're wild, he'd say. Never trust them. Each afternoon, when I put the scoop of raw meat, rich with eggs and vitamins, on their trays, I'd call to each a greeting. Their small, thin faces would follow as if slightly curious. In fall, they went out in a van, returning sorted, matched, their skins hanging down on huge metal hangers pinned by their mouths. My uncle would take them out when company came and drape them over his arm, the sweetest cargo. He'd blow down the pelt softly, and the hairs would part for his breath and show the shining underlife, which, like the shining of the soul, gives us each character and beauty. And I have a very particular memory of this next poem by Cornelius Eady in the infancy of the Academy of American Poets website. When they first began having audio, I was a junior at the University of Toledo, and I somehow found their website and found this exact audio, the exact audio recording of this poem. I'm a fool to love you. Some folks will tell you the blues is a woman, some type of supernatural creature. My mother would tell you, if she could, about her life with my father, a strange and sometimes cruel gentleman. She would tell you about the choices a young black woman faces. Is falling in with some man a deal with the devil in blue terms, the tongue we use when we don't want nuance to get in the way, when we need to talk straight? My mother chooses my father after choosing a man who was, as we sing it, of no account. This man made my father look good. That's how bad it was. He made my father seem like an island in the middle of a stormy sea. He made my father look like a rock. And is the blues the moment you realize you exist in a stacked deck? You look in a mirror at your young face, the face my sister carries, and you know it's the only leverage you've got. Does this create a hurt that whispers, how are you gonna do? Is the blues the moment you shrug your shoulders and agree a girl without money is nothing, dust to be pushed around by any old breeze? Compared to this, my father seems briefly to be a fire escape. This is the way the blues works, its sorry wonders. Makes trouble look like a feather bed. Makes the wrong man's kisses a healing. So those are the two goats, greatest of all time in my book, for many, many reasons. I'll read one poem from my most recent book, Pardon My Heart. And since we're close to, what were you say?
How'd you come up with the title?
Oh, God. I didn't even know it was I think it's a Neil Young song. I didn't even know that. I was like, I needed to write one or two more poems. I wrote one that I felt was strong enough to lead the book with. And then that's kind of the titular phrase. And I was just like, yeah, it feels good. It feels right. And then I found out it was somebody else's song title. I was like, whatever. Since it's close to Valentine's Day, I'll read this, which is kind of like a mythic post-colonial love letter between my wife and I, with many embellishments. It's called Edenless Us. We only have one kid. That's the main lie in here. Edenless Us. We met during a stretch when my soul had been smoldering, my mind not more than a cistern of ruinous miscalculations. In the overcast tavern, she introduced herself, saying, "Ever feel like you could eat the whole damn night in one bite?" Dawn soon careened between buildings, finding her post-transcendentalist face. The real estate agent assured us the head-to-foot fracture in the foundation should be no worrisome detail, as we sat back in his merciless Mercedes. The cries and cachinnation of our 9 children dismantled our sleep and intensified our dreams. 150 years prior, the 2 of us would have been born slaves. She, at best, forced to wet nurse the sour offspring of the big house, and I, at best, leaping between English and Spanish to entrap some buttoned-up widow for my dastardly master. How magnificently tipsy my beloved and I walk these fresh millennium streets. Somehow, we're still blithe enough to get arrested for naked gyration in the public park. I'm ecstatic there's no Eden or heaven or resurrection, she mouths to me through the windows of the separate cop cars in which we're cuffed. So I'm working on, I heard the phrase rabbit hole earlier. This might, I want to say this tentatively, but it might be a novel in verse that I'm trying to wrestle back toward verse more. And I won't ever, outside of today, publicly claim that it has any novel DNA in terms of the genre of fiction. But there's this semi-autobiographical speaker that is appearing in all the poems that I've been working on. And once the narrative started kind of bugging me, I was like, I have to write some long poems to clarify some of the exposition. And essentially, he's an end of the 20th, early 21st century photographer that got a job at the New York Times as a documentary photographer and news photographer when he was much more of a fine art photographer and wanted to portray the nuances of Black joy, parenthood, familyhood, etc. And he gets pigeonholed because of his background and his youthful portfolio as being like a sort of on the front lines type of photographer. And as this happens, he starts to spiral into the addictive tendencies that exist in his family's background and in the community that he's from. So a lot of the book is trying to hash these things out lyrically and really strangely. The poem that I'll read today has like extended narrative sections, and then the other half of the sections are like, I would say more lyric, more image-based, and those two modes, I wouldn't say they're fighting, but they're just kind of, they're doing a little two-step, and sometimes they merge. But it's called Heaven Here and There. 1. And it's got 99 sections. I'm kidding. It's got, I think, like 7 sections. It's like 6 pages long. Heaven Here and There. 1. Disillusionment and the like. Get out my coffee house, my head house, out my soul floating in a black t-shirt. I want to be an unfound forest, drunk on clean rain and or miles of light. All ordinances gnawing my imagination's long arms. May your jaws lock, then diffuse to falling sand. Late century beach, where 2 of my loved ones in swim trunks once hunched behind the pop trunk and sucked narcotic smoke. Your shores are more orderly now, and the water claims more ground. For a day, you were heaven to some of us city kids, screaming and running until the lifeguards left. 2, hope ain't gold and can't be caught in a single color and has footsteps discreet as a food thief's, stubborn and keen and estranged from rapacity and will wait over your shoulder until you're listening. 3, the backseat floor of my grandfather's tawny Skylark cradled a pile of empty Jameson shooters, tossed to rest at different angles and clinking over potholes and making a green medley of stray light. The few mornings he visited one summer, my sister and I poured buckets of hose water and Dawn onto the parts of his Buick we could reach, and he paid us for the fraudulent washing with ice cream sandwiches that strew our faces. Months later, his cash gone and his liver writhing, my mom, upon a call from some woman in his racetrack motel room, took us to help commence him living his final civilian stint with us. On our sofa, he slept, my mom sometimes feeding him yogurt, taking a sponge to his flesh, and lowering whiskey sips to his mouth when the tremors raged. She paid with fresh debt for the unavoidable hospital so the morphine could carry him away. You wouldn't have known, watching my mom smoke calmly in the car at the cemetery, how the man had battered 6 children and a wife. And you damn sure have seen no angel more gracefully put out a Salem and spray glove box perfume to her wrists as my mom did before leading us past tombstones toward a preacher holding his book barehanded in winter. 4. Come down, you and your breath of bench warrants and repossession threats and fine-grained allocations of shame will be hucklebucked when the forthcoming morning disembarks and grins at the prospect of strangling pettiness. 5. Faith ain't God-dependent and looks away from predictable books and coolly leaves any space where proclamation overplays. 6. Rashad, in an overtime loss against a private school, totaled 28 rebounds, and after each dead ball, his thoughts licked the beautiful fat of the other player's fear. Have you ever gently arranged mid-grade flour into a moist Swisher skin while wearing a faux satin jersey, black socks, and a jock strap on a bench beneath the palpitations of the visiting locker room's fluorescent tubes? I mainly ask so that any of our pasts may briefly be more than people and things taking the scenic, permanent trip into mist, and so that we, who meet inexplicably in the world of ink and paper, may assume the shared posture of slanted grass. Rashad's smile would stay in the back of your eyes the way the edge of a tide seems to find a brief, full stillness on the sand, even though it's already receding, and a Rawlings, careening off the netted rim, returned to his wide hands gravitationally. Rashad enabling our squad 10-point runs that freed us to curse near the face of the priest who led the opposition's pregame prayer with a contrived humility that insulted us. Rashad, the most nonviolent and loving among us, who, for his hoop brilliance and for all the classes he missed while feeding or corralling his siblings, won a Division II scholarship that eventually pressured some of his lower vertebrae into agony, surgery, and then brought him a slow-growing codeine need, followed 9 years by organ failure, and finally a wake and a burial, at which America's invisible library of biases taunted our neighborhood. Rashad's mother removing her heels and standing in nylons for hours and staring at the fastened casket. I detail some of my people's grief here in the language of an empire that crossed raucous waters and warped into another empire, because sorrow and loss, when glared at long enough with enough gall, can sometimes convert into a brief tenderness we may later exchange as strangers in some courtroom or depot or frigid intersection, although the laws and the prices and the wind don't care whether we become more human knowing the likenesses of our pain. 7. Grief, how great you remain, at commanding our front rooms and at casting our faces with the blankness of burglarized spaces. Grief, your father must be drastically handsome, long ago crowned eternity's quick-handed dealer of abandonments. Father whose brisk-winded absences still elaborate our siblinghood. 8. Upturn, how you so superbly late. How you glide, exempt from misery's unstinting sweep. 9. And this is the final section. I thought I'd fled my youth's leading bereavements, earning costless admission to an East Coast school, and ultimately gaining employment at a famous, fraught newspaper whose city ceaselessly mesmerizes and rebukes. Any song or story centered by addiction and or religion usually includes a confession, hence mine here. I allowed my calling, making film photographs of genuine people beyond studio lighting, into the gut of U.S. success, concurrently underrating the spite kept by my white editor and his media conglomerate. Then, to pay for my legal and copyright fallout, I generated pictures that fed misconception and helped sell a perished era's vain materials, while my kin in my birth quarter drudged. My gradual professional calamity triggered the sincere hunger for booze and speed bred in my family's stunning blood. And the key reprieve, the foremost heaven I found, was a vacant house's screened back porch in Newark, where not a saint, but a man, a creative director at a music magazine I'd rushed gaudy feature work for, permitted my indefinite stay. His mother had passed, suddenly titling him the vacant property. I can't let another black artist lose a roof, he said, placing the keys before me on the epoxied bar in the Harlem Tavern, where I'd spilled the details of my brokenness, my expired leases, and my mom's autumn death. Heaven indeed. June, on a tidy porch with bathroom access, an air mattress, a few curt crews generating cosmetic updates to the 3-bedroom craftsman, and the gentle vibrations remaining from the black magazine man's dispersed family. Heaven, clothes folded in a wheeled suitcase, one 35mm camera with prime lens, 5 rolls of Tri-X, a butterfly knife, toiletries, and 3 worn paperbacks whose existentialisms were dented brass, cradled in vapor. My 4 weeks in heaven, weaning slowly off alcohol and Adderall, feasting on bodega sandwiches and oranges, walking miles of New Jersey concrete, making street photos. Nights thinking in my bedroll of all my beloved departed, of their defying our world's ferine swipes, of their preference to turn hurt inward, and how I might earn a new stretch wherein my memories couldn't find the door to torment, and my dismay could be dust wiped swiftly off glass. Thank you.